This is Keith Creighton from Eastern Illinois University's Teacher Leadership Master's Program, and this is my presentation of my data-based plan. Dennis Lab School is a pre-kindergarten through 8th grade program. Over the last 5 years, the school has undergone some massive changes, adding the pre-kindergarten program as well as expanding to the 7th and 8th grades and implementing a full-on middle school. The impetus for this change was a partnership with Millikan University, a new principal being hired with an extraordinary vision, and the adoption of project-based learning as a vehicle for delivering instruction. Now that the school is 5 years into its changes and the dust is settling, the steering committee is looking at developing a new strategic plan that will carry the school through the next 3 years. As part of this strategic plan, the school is re-examining the driving questions of professional learning communities. Those questions are: what do we want students to learn? How will we know when they've learned it? What will we do if they don't learn it? And what will we do if they already know the material? The school has spent significant time and energy and resources emphasizing the first three questions of professional learning communities. However, the school does not really do a good job for those students who already know the material. The district does have a gifted program, but it is in its last years of implementation. Due to budget cuts, the gifted program is no longer going to carry through. Even with the program in place, the supports that students who are intellectually gifted get are very limited. In the 3rd through 6th grades, the students receive 1 hour of pull-out instruction per week. In the middle school, those students only receive 1 day of a field trip excursion per quarter. While that program is wonderful and the day is great and the students are very excited, overall it doesn't provide the kind of necessary supports to really stimulate and intellectually challenge those students who are identified as intellectually gifted. In looking at the literature, grade skipping has been noted for years as an effective way to help students deal with when the material is too easy for them. Students in longitudinal studies have been shown to be more likely to get advanced degrees in STEM-based fields. They graduate sooner and publish sooner, and they earn more lifetime citations through publications. Right now, there is no district plan for grade skipping. However, accelerating a subject, the research suggests, can be almost as effective as skipping a grade. The district does have in place a plan for middle school students to join the high school for math. In this data-based plan, a plan will be developed to send 8th graders next year to the high school for honors math instruction. The first step in determining a plan for middle schoolers to join the high school honors math courses was to identify which students should be eligible to go forward and do these classes. The middle school team met together and developed the flowchart you see here. They wanted to look at not only one test score to determine eligibility. The high school only provided a cut score for the MAPS testing that they require of students looking to enter these honors courses. The middle school staff believed that students needed much more of a deeper look and understanding as to whether or not they would be successful and eligible for this program. They decided to look at 2 different sets of data: quantitative data from math classes and test scores, as well as qualitative data from other scores. The research suggests that motivation and perseverance are 2 key components in successful student grade skipping or subject skipping. A plan was developed to evaluate the students and to begin to work with the high school to pave a path for these students to join high school honors algebra and honors geometry classes. Students with exceptional learning needs will benefit in both direct and indirect ways from this program of accelerated math courses for 8th grade students. Directly benefiting, of course, are the students who are identified as intellectually gifted. This program of accelerating the students will help to put them in a program that is more suited to their needs as students. The subject matter and the skills will be more appropriate for their skills and abilities. In addition, they'll be able to quickly pick up on the missing skills that they may not have had by skipping the grade. The support will be provided more ongoing and more timely than the current 1 day a quarter programs that we currently have right now in the district. It is unclear as the end of this gifted program comes about in the next year whether or not students will still be tested using the COGAT assessment to determine eligibility in gifted programming. This program, by accelerating students and looking at scores that they have in their classes, will help to loop in students who may not be identified as intellectually gifted and get them plugged into a program that meets their needs. Indirectly, the program could stand to benefit students with learning disabilities or students who have IEPs. The students will benefit from smaller math class sizes now that students have left that programming and gone on to the high school. It provides the teachers an opportunity to eliminate one whole or maybe even two differentiated groups that they need to plan for each day. That means that they would have more time and energy to meet with students of different learning groups, and they can differentiate more effectively for less groups. In fact, when looking at the data and deciding on the pacing, the hope is that a more suitable pace for these students will be achieved because you will not have to factor in the outliers of these high scores from the other students that are taking the honors math courses. In determining eligibility and deciding the need for this program and how many students it would affect, the first place that data was analyzed from was from the PARCC test from last year in 2016. You'll see on the graphic here that grade 6 is the year because those will be the rising 8th grade students last year. Of all of the students that tested that year at Dennis Lab School, only 9% met or exceeded the standards of the PARCC test. This is such a small number of students, it's less than 10%, roughly 4 to 5 students who met or exceeded on these PARCC tests. When planning for instruction and you have to meet the target of the most students, it means that that small group of students is constantly just a small group that is differentiated for. And try as they may, teachers constantly, reluctantly admit that they don't do a great job of differentiating upwards for those students because so much time and attention is needed to hit those larger groups and subgroups of students. The MAPS test is a test that is administered 3 times a year that can provide formative assessment that is ongoing for how students are doing that is nationally normed. The MAP scores produce a result that is called the student's RIT score. The high school provided only one guideline for selecting students for programming in high school honors math courses, and that was a raw score or a cut score on the MAPS test. What you see here in this graph is every student in the 7th grade plotted with their fall and winter MAPS score results. The horizontal line represents the cut score that is used by the high schools to determine eligibility for its honors programs. As you can see here, there are several students who spike considerably higher than the line of the cut score. These students must be challenged more effectively than they are getting right now. These students and any students who meet above that cut score line were determined by the middle school team for a deeper look into more of their quantitative and qualitative analysis for consideration into the programming. While there may be other students who could fit because of other factors in the qualitative programming, because the high school provides this cut score, the school was limited to just selecting those students who had achieved that score on one of these 2 tests. Because students are not made up of just one test in one moment in one time, students needed to have a larger picture developed for them about their abilities. What you see here in the graph is a list of the students who achieved that cut score and were looked at for consideration in a program of acceleration for math. The green columns at the top represent pre-test scores, post-test percentages, the turn-in rate, and Tier 1. These are math scores that look to help to give a broader picture. By looking at pre-test percentage, the team was looking to determine which students naturally know and have the skills in math before they are even exposed to the unit. If you look at these scores, only one or two students really look like they have an understanding of these concepts before being taught. The post-test results show that all but one of the students considered for the program average above a 90% on all of their post-test and summative assessments. You can see the growth from one to the other shows exceptional growth in all of these students from the pre-test to the post-test. Because motivation is such a huge factor in success, the team wanted to look at the rate at which students turn in their work on time and the pride that they show in their work. This is represented as a percentage of the time that they turn in their work. And finally, the category labeled Tier 1. These are a set of examples where the students are measured as to whether they are 1.5 times discrepant above the average of the class on a given assignment. Now, we could not use all different kinds or every single assessment because assessments with a top end where a student could achieve 100% are sometimes difficult to prove that they are 1.5 times discrepant above because sometimes 100% is not itself 1.5 times discrepant above the average of the class. The orange categories represent the MAP scores from the fall and winter. The RIT scores were not particularly useful for comparative purposes because there's not much difference between a high score and a low score, just a couple of points. So instead, we looked for the results that were representing the percentile rankings of the students. And we used those scores as a comparison measure among each of the students. Research suggests that students not only need to be intellectually advanced in mathematics in order to be successful, but they also need to exhibit some of the drive and motivation and perseverance of successful students. With that in mind, the team decided to create a qualitative rubric that all of the teachers could assess the students on. 3 criterion were used for developing this rubric: maturity, attitude, disposition, and behavior, independence and resourcefulness, and planning and organization. Each teacher who teaches one of the students who is being considered for this program ranked the student on all 3 of the categories. All of those scores were tabulated together and averaged to find a significant average for each of the 3 criterion referenced. This table here represents the summary of those qualitative averages. The maturity and attitude, independence and resourcefulness, and planning and organization. The results are tallied from the average of 6 teachers offering input on each of the students in those areas in their particular classes and courses. Those scores you can see here range anywhere from 31% up to 100%. The high school is going to provide Dennis Lab School with a seat count of how many open positions there are within the class that we could use as placements for our honors students next year. In order to do that, we needed to take the data that we had gathered and we needed to find a way in order to rank the students and prioritize them. So we averaged all of the classroom data, we averaged the MAPS percentile averages, we averaged the dispositions together, and we used those 3 to create a final average or percentage score. The students were then ranked from highest score to lowest score. According to the results, the students who are marked in green are going to be recommended for the program if the seat count's allowed. We will fill as many seats as we can, starting from the top and going down through to the bottom. The last two students were seen while they have made the cut score for MAPS and the percentile average. They just did not seem to stack up comparatively to the other students there. In fact, as you can see, the first two or three students on the list uh, are part of our gifted programming, and you can see that they are rising to the top with our data scores. Legal and policy parameters. Because Dennis Labs Middle School is such a new program, this was the first time we needed to struggle with the idea of recommending students for honors math classes in their 8th grade year. The plan was designed not to be a 1 year plan, but to become a procedure and a policy for students in years to come, and that it can become what we use year after year in determining eligibility for these programs. The district has undergone a massive overhaul in the last month or so. A new superintendent has been hired, and 4 new board members were elected on a platform of completely changing and developing a new strategic plan for the district. In the last 5 to 10 years, the district has really made an effort for schools to become very site-based, and as a result, each school that sends students to a high school in 8th grade for math courses has a slightly different way of identifying those students. It is quite possible that with the district overhaul and leadership from the school board and superintendent, that maybe these policies and procedures will start to become a little bit more uniform for each of the schools. It is the hope of Dennis Lab School that the policy and parameters that we have set up could become the district policy because it feels to be very fair and comprehensive of the students. There is a lot of potential for policy and procedural changes in the years to come, but until that happens from the district perspective, we will continue to use the policies and plans that we started this year. While the work was done mostly by the middle school team in developing the plans and procedures, it certainly was not done in isolation. Meetings were had with the principals from both schools to start to develop the logistics and start to identify the policies and procedures that will happen, as well as to look at the priorities of each principal and what they would like to do. Special education teachers were consulted as a way to sort of mimic and mirror what they do in identifying students using 1.5 times discrepancy below, and mirroring that same kind of process to provide the same kind of supports for our students who are on the opposite side of spectrum. We met with the district gifted coordinator, who told us a lot about the past practices of the gifted program, the current state, and also its future implications. Teachers were consulted to talk about the way that they differentiate for students who are intellectually gifted, what kind of programming they use, and the support that they feel that they need. In addition, teacher opinions were consulted when we were developing the qualitative rubric, as well as what quantitative data to use and the flowchart that was displayed earlier. The students who were affected most by this, the ones that were in consideration, were met with very closely to discuss what their concerns would be, what their interest would be, and to gather a little bit of information about what life is like within the classrooms if they don't move ahead. And finally, parents were talked with, and they discussed in depth. Approached parents were met with at the very beginning when we were first looking into this program and just to see and gauge whether or not they would be supportive of such a program. When they were, we went forward, and as plans developed and students were identified, a more in-depth meeting was held with the parents and students. It is very important that the parents support it, but also that they are not pushing their students into it, that both students and parents have to want this to work. Otherwise, research shows it's not quite as effective because the stress level gets ratcheted up from one side or the other. Most of the work at identifying students is done. As you can see from the earlier tables and charts, the school has identified those students which will be participating in the program. Now, the school is waiting on the high school to send down the master schedule with the number of open seats that we can use to fill in students. Once we do that, we'll take those students and we have to then program their middle school schedule. Because they will be missing one period in the day, we will have to decide with the students and the parents which class they are going to miss. We have our current master schedule set up that the students could miss their elective, which is music elective or an art elective, or they could miss their middle school math class, which would serve as a support and a study hall for them with this other class. So the students and the parents will have to work together to decide which one, because our schedule can accommodate both. We're going to plan a field trip to the high school so that the students can get the lay of the land, can also answer any logistical questions that they have regarding the procedures and how this is going to work for them, can meet the teacher who will be teaching the course to try and put to ease any burdens that they might have about taking this giant leap forward. We need to plan for logistical concerns. Transportation is still being worked on, as well as small things that happen between two different schools. The middle school at Dennis Lab does not have a dress code, but the high schools do have a dress code and uniform guidelines. So it will need to be worked out whether or not our students will need to wear uniforms all day so that they can participate in the high school, whether they have to change, or whether that requirement isn't going to be required for students who are coming in from the middle school. There are other logistical concerns to iron out just in times, and those things need to be taken care of, hopefully before the summer starts. Also, either over the summer or at the end of this year, we need to develop plans to support those students who are going over there next year. The counselor needs to set a schedule to meet with each of these students at least once a week to check in and see how they are doing. A 6-week trial period needs to be established, as well as an exit strategy for students so that if they are not successful or if this does not feel right, they can come back to the middle school programming without any shame or fear of retribution or any kind of worries because it just didn't quite work out. We also want to establish a regular check-in with the high school teacher who teaches our students, the students themselves, and of course the parents to see how things are going. This 6-week trial basis is going to be pretty intensive, and then the support will continue, but maybe not at such a frequent rate if the students are proving that they are successful. As this program moves forward, the administrators of each school, the high school and Dennis Lab School, will need to play a significant role in helping to coordinate the logistical concerns. Things like transportation, solving of the uniform, any policy and procedures, discipline things that may happen. They'll need to coordinate their efforts on those two fronts to work with the district to find solutions to those problems. But even more importantly, a lot of the research points to teacher perception being very, very important in students who are accelerated past their normal grade level. The teacher who is receiving the students, it is very important to have a good, strong plan for those incoming students. The teacher will often set the tone, and that tone will ease a lot of the social anxieties that go along with being in a grade level that is not your own, or being more advanced and into high school when you're really only an 8th grader. And so finding the right teachers to teach these courses and then working with the teachers to help support them through some professional development or coaching sessions is going to be vitally important to making sure that there's a smooth transition for these students, especially in this first year. In the absence of a teacher who is lacking a little bit in their zest for the new incoming students and their assignment, research does suggest that some policies and procedures can be implemented by the administration in order to ensure that smooth transition. So the principals will definitely need to keep an eye on how things are going and whether the success and failure of the program is due to a policy or a procedural thing that can be amped up and supported in a more significant way. The biggest limitation to this program is that right now and currently only the subject of math is offered. There is no way, there's no path right now at this time to accelerate learning for students who may have a giftedness in language arts, in music, in science, or in any other subject. Right now it is only limited to math classes. As a result, we can really only reach a population of students who are mathematically inclined and may not be inclined in other areas, and students who are in other areas may be stuck in courses that seem boring and out of touch to them. Another limitation, as opposed to general grade skipping from third to fourth grade, or third to fifth grade, I should say, is that you have to coordinate between two schools, between a pre-K through 8 program and through a high school. And that means you have to get a lot more people involved. And the program is really determined about who is going to advocate the most for these students and how long they're going to be willing to fight and how important it is for them to fight for those. So through teacher changes, teacher turnover, through administrative turnover, can this program last when it does involve more than one school? If it's just housed in one school, your options are a little bit more open for students. But because we don't have the opportunity to identify students and skip them in grades earlier, there's no district policy for that. Right now, this is the best that we can have. But it is a limitation because it requires a lot more effort and a lot more pieces where something could go wrong and everybody could take their toys and go home. And finally, of course, the limitation is all of the logistical concerns. The transportation is really the largest one in providing that transportation for students, providing networking between the communications between the teachers and the students, even to the little things like coordinating report cards and grades like that. Those logistical concerns will be very difficult to overhandle, and they can also just really cause the momentum of the project to wind down. But hopefully, we will have a lot of success with this program, and it will begin to start a conversation about expanding opportunities for students into other areas like language arts, like music, like all of these other programs that the high schools can offer that our students might show a little bit of giftedness towards. In summary, Dennis Lab School has undergone significant changes in the last 5 years. Many of the changes have resulted in significant improvement in all areas. One area that has yet to be addressed is the programming for students who are intellectually gifted. This year, a plan has been developed to send 8th grade students from the middle school over to the high school to participate in honors math courses. The literature supports the acceleration of students into grades and courses that are appropriate for their skill levels. Next year, the first Dennis Lab School students will begin to take classes in math at the high school. The hope is that the school will now provide a little bit better for the needs of these exceptional students.